How can something as beautiful as this be dying? A plague is ruining the land, but the tree of life still stands. Question is, for how long? End is coming to the new world.
I really enjoyed my time with Biomutant. I like open world games, and while I do agree that the industry is very saturated with the concept, each time a new one comes out, I'm more than happy to sink hours into them and compare them to each other. Among the dozens of titles I've played in the past 20 years, Biomutant stands proud as a huge achievement for the small team that developed it, and I'm very happy to have experienced such a charismatic and visually creative take on the genre. I wanted those to be my first words in the video because I will be discussing many of the issues the game has, the strange design choices and the obvious feature creep, how these things hold this game back from being one of the all-time greats, and how in the end I will still recommend that you give Biomutant a chance at some point. Let's begin with the story and setting of the game. In the words of its creative director, Biomutant is an open-world, post-apocalyptic kung fu fable. It's been an undetermined amount of years since we humans polluted the world so badly we ended up going extinct. A combination of evolution, radiation and chemicals has fundamentally changed the fauna of the planet. Among nature's creations are these rodent, marsupial-looking creatures that seem to be the dominant species as far as intelligence goes. They are civilized, they have villages, tribes, they wage war, they trade. You are one of these creatures, and your mission is to save the Tree of Life, believed to be the source of all, well, life. The tree is slowly dying because a group of massive creatures known as the World Eaters, no not those, have slowly evolved to be able to feed on the hard bark that makes up the roots of the Tree of Life. I absolutely love the setting of this game. It's an easy concept, but such a rare sight in media and especially in video games. Yes, the virus has infected, the nukes have been dropped, and the asteroid has fallen. Was it an asteroid in Rage? Yes, it was. But despite being by far the most likely scenario for mass human extinction, an environmental apocalypse is not the most common setting for video games. Even less a post-human environmental apocalypse, where we have all died out or flown away to space and left the world to its own devices. The result is the story of a group of creatures still having to deal with the consequences of our actions thousands and possibly hundreds of thousands of years after these proved too much for us to handle. There's also the more personal story of your main character and the main villain of the game. These do overlap quite a bit and share the overall message of the game, as well as many of its themes. The game puts a strong emphasis on morality and the concept of fate, and whether or not our past actions and most importantly experiences get to decide our eventual future. A strong emphasis that doesn't really pay off, I would say. I will not be discussing story spoilers in the video. I will only say there are a couple of twists to be had. The first one is a legit twist that I found pretty interesting, and the second one was quite confusing, and I'm still waiting for the long video or Reddit post that explains it. At the end, the base plot of the game is resolved very much in the manner you expect it to be, and you are left more with ideas and concepts than with actual facts and events. You have the option to follow a light or a dark path, but the ending plays out quite literally the same, with only a little flavor changing. Overall, I would say the setting is more of a draw in this one than the actual story. There's a lot to be said about it, and how it intertwines with the presentation to convey this feeling of living in a world that's very hostile but at the same time teeming with life. I will say a bit more about how cool this is when we get to the presentation. Just know for now that it does a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to the appeal of this game and why it would keep you playing for some time. With the exception of a couple of cutscenes, do not expect to see the deep personal stories of the creatures that inhabit this world. The NPCs in this game have very little to no personality, mostly because the narrator stole it from them. Now, I've seen a lot of complaints about the narrator, people calling him annoying and asking to get rid of the feature. I don't think this is fair to the voice actor that portrays the character. His name is David Shaw Parker, and there's no denying that he does a wonderful job with the narration. It gives the game the feel of a nature documentary, but with mutants and kung fu. It's pretty cool. Having a narrator is more of a design issue than anything else, as this approach does take the spotlight away from the characters that inhabit this setting that, as I said, is the main appeal here. It's also quite unnecessary if you ask me. I mean, characters do speak, they just do so in gibberish.
Wonders what kind of good you'll get up to today.
There are clearly many different voices throughout the game saying these things. I can think of a couple of very successful games that also do this without a narrator. To explain this further, let me talk to you about Mechanicus. Actually, no, we're not gonna talk about Mechanicus right now. You see, this has been patched now, and you can choose to make the characters say gibberish with subtitles without a narrator. It was actually patched less than a week after the game's release, along with a ton of other things. Some of them I was able to remove from the script, but this part was partially edited and I couldn't just delete it and not fuck with the pacing, so I have to edit this on top. The good people at Experiment 101 are so good at their jobs it's actually really hard to write all this. Anyway, let's continue with the video before they patch the game again. Let's park the narrator thing for a minute, we'll come back to it later. Let's talk about how the world of Biomutant doesn't feel real. I know, right? The raccoon creature with a big fuck you sword doesn't feel real, really? Well, don't click away just yet, let me explain. Explain that is in the laziest way possible by comparing it to another game. This is me playing The Witcher 3. I'm roaming around and I come up on some guarded treasure. The guardian in question is a bilge hag. I dispatch it, and if I want to, I can go into my bestiary and read up on it, and many other monsters in the game. Sometimes NPCs will tell me to beware a certain creature or group of bandits, sometimes it will be my quest to kill them. I'm roaming around in Biomutant and I come across...
Identify yourself! Who the fuck are you?
What are these creatures? Who are these guys? I don't know, and most importantly, I will not know. There is no bestiary or encyclopedia or any NPCs that says beware of the blip blocks or something like that. Some of the big monsters have boss health bars with their name, but that tells me nothing aside from the devs being creative in naming things. And no, I'm not just being unfair in comparing Biomutant to a game that has several books worth of lore to use. This game is missing some very basic foundations that are expected of any world with its own mythology, be it fantasy or sci-fi. I know why I'm fighting the Geth in Mass Effect, I know why the Thalmor are not to be trusted in Skyrim, I know why the Fallen resent the humans in Destiny. The overall feel of the world of Biomutant is that the developers didn't think a lot further than post-apocalypse but with furry creatures instead of humans. And the clearest example of that is that we don't even get a name for our own species. You get to choose a breed, yeah, but this is only cosmetic and never comes up again. The developer calls them Muppets, but he doesn't make it sound like it's the official name. The things you will know about the world of Biomutant is that humans are gone, the ecosystem has evolved, there's your species, some of you are divided into tribes, there's the Tree of Life, and you seem to have a religion center around it, and these massive creatures are putting it in danger. I'm not recounting the setup again here. With the exception of knowing a tiny bit more about your character, the quest givers and the bad guys, this is all you will ever know about the world of Biomutant. I've seen a lot of people say that it's left open so that you draw your own conclusions, and honestly, not only is that a massive cop-out, but it leaves a lot of room for questions we maybe aren't supposed to have about the game. For example, the first time I encountered one of these dudes, called Mumps, the game told me they were big because they were hit hard by evolution. And then I started thinking, since the game won't tell me, maybe they are the muscle in this society. Maybe they help build all the structures we can see. Maybe they are like pack mules, not very smart but ridiculously strong. And maybe... wait, is it wearing a hoodie? Who made that for him? I get the ones from each faction probably had uniforms made for them, but this one looks like a normal, modern human hoodie. These are clearly much bigger than humans, what the hell? This guy likes trains, and his name is Choo Choo? Okay, I kinda draw the silliness line at Elvis Otter. He even says his gibberish like Elvis. Before someone tells me the game is intended for kids, you can commit several war crimes and animal cruelty. I don't buy it, sorry. I'm usually the first one to defend these things and tell people to suspend their disbelief in favor of fun and wackiness, but here it kinda clashes against having to think about the setting because we get very little lore to explain the world around us. I get that it adds to the sense that this is a fable and you don't usually know a lot about these. Like, no one is hearing about the scorpion and the frog for the first time and wants to know the name of the village the frog comes from. But when one of your main selling points and the thing that makes you stand out from the rest is your unique take on a fantasy sci-fi open world, I don't think this was the right path to take. Okay, let's return to the narrator for a second. While you might not get a lot of information and lore about the world you explore in Biomutant, you will get a ton of exposition from the narrator about the world that was. That is, our world, when humans ruled the earth. For the first few hours of the game, this is very cool. You encounter posters where the narrator has something to say, you have side quests to find machines and devices that we humans used to use as well as notice boards. It gives the game a cool 9 vibe. You remember 9? That animated movie that was very much not for children and also in my opinion quite underrated? However, the more you play the game, and the more you realize that the lore of this world is actually kind of an inch deep, the less you will appreciate this commentary by the narrator.
That's a putty upper plaza. Some were actually trying to build something before it all started to end.
You see, if we weren't going to get so deep into the story of the setting of Biomutant, it would have been cool if this was at least the story of these intelligent creatures trying to make sense of the messed up world we left them. The presentation does nail this pretty well, which again I'll get to in a minute, but then the narrative just does away with it entirely. Here's an example. I was crunching around some building and came across some weights. I thought, cool, let's see what my little creature does with them, and the narrator just says it. Use these to get stronger. The same happens with every human item you can find in the game. The narrator is omniscient and knows everything there is to know about the world before. And I'm still not getting into spoilers, but you do get to know a bit more about him during the game, and it only makes less sense after that. A good 70 to 80% of what the narrator has to tell us during our stay in this incredible land are things we already know. I know what a phone is, I know what a TV is, I know we're polluting everything and basically killing the world. He doesn't even get it wrong or sound like he's trying to figure it out. He gets the names wrong, and by wrong I just mean differently, like a treadmill is a run board or a TV is an iBox. But aside from that, he knows exactly what they are and what we use them for. It's really a bummer because there were a couple of times where I got glimpses of what could have been. In one of the many derelict houses I found a projector. I figured out the puzzle and turned it on. It was a news broadcast. It was apparently talking about how there's so much waste and contamination, etc. And then an image appeared of one of the goo-corrupted monsters in the game. And I thought, that's so cool, I've seen those around. It created a small feeling in me that I was piecing together the past of this world by what little was left of it, but those moments are few and far between. The game is, for the most part, the narrator telling you, oh yeah, this thing, it was useful to do this and that. This place, here they did this and that. Your character doesn't speak either, so it's not like it's reacting and asking questions. Sometimes you can offer some input and ask, but again, the answers are going to be things that you, as a human, already know. Some will come with the argument that it's a small team and it's their first game, and I get it, but I also don't really agree with that. This team we're talking about made a beautiful 8x8 kilometer map, with different biomes, a cool combo-based combat system with expensive crafting mechanics on top. All these things are great achievements that in my honest opinion should be secondary to making your setting immersive and believable. If I'm being very negative in this section, it's mostly because of all the things Biomutant has been criticized for. This was the one that disappointed me the most. One of my most anticipated things to do was get lost in this world and its stories, get to know these characters. Anyway, enough about all that. Let's talk about how good this game looks. There's no denying that the looks of this game were a big part of what made it so interesting for everyone during the past 4 years. And I have to say, the visuals do not disappoint. I'm actually dreading the time I have to edit all this together because I have so many clips simply called graphics, and I can only choose a few to show here. Let's start with the obvious part and talk about how effortlessly beautiful this game is. The lighting and colors on display constantly join forces to distract you from whatever it is you were doing. There were so many times when I was just roaming around and came across a nice view and just had to stop for a minute and admire it. If you play this game, go up to a high vantage point and look around. I dare you to at least not stop for a minute. I can honestly say with little doubt that there wasn't a single session that I played this game where I didn't find any new sight to be amazed at. The game also has some great environmental variety. You have dense forests, grasslands, swamplands, archipelagos, and that's just to name a few. But I wanted to focus on a different aspect of the presentation, since there isn't much more to say about the visuals, they're just really good. What surprised me about the world of Biomutant is how well it's woven into the setting of the game. Beautiful landscapes transition seamlessly into dangerous radioactive areas. What used to be water you could swim in is now so polluted in some parts that it requires a special vehicle upgrade to move through. Or it isn't even water, it's just an oily sludge that will seal your fate really fast if you're not careful. The more beautiful zones still have trash all over if you look closely. The inhabitants of this world have used this trash to erect monoliths that you can find all over the place. The crafting system allows you to use this garbage to make weapons and improve your armor. Not a single vista in the game is without a trace of our presence, the evidence of our mistakes, and the reminder of what we did to this world. The game also bleeds creativity and charisma from every aspect of its presentation. Your character runs on all fours. To unlock fast travel points, you pee on them. Your companion is a little grasshopper that follows you around. Want to move around the world faster? How about a little bat? Or a helicopter backpack? It feels like one of those games from the turn of the century, when developers knew less so they took more risks, and the dude with the gun was much less prevalent. I also really like the soundtrack, especially the main theme. It has all the notes of an epic adventure through a magical land. Combat music could use a few more tracks though, as I'm pretty sure there's only one and it loops around constantly. I don't usually have anything to say about the map of open world games, as in the literal map you pull up to see where you are, but the one in Biomutant stands out as there's some cool things to see in it. You can see the big bosses of the game, as well as important NPCs and even some secrets. These glowing entrances are usually places with high level loot, for example. As far as optimization goes, I don't have the most powerful rig in the world, so don't expect to see any 4K or anything. I played it on 1080p with most settings maxed out, except the hair thingy. Using VSync, it maintained a constant 60 through the whole game, with the exception of sometimes getting choppy for a few seconds for the first time I loaded into the game. I only encountered 3 bugs in my 40 plus hours of playtime. One of them was funny, the other one was annoying, and one that I didn't really care much about. The one I didn't care about was some popping here and there, which was fine, didn't happen all that often. The one that was kinda annoying was one of the weapon models getting stuck in the inventory. I had to restart the game for this, it only happened once. The funny one was this guy sliding around. Actually, maybe this isn't a bug. These creatures are capable of magical things. Who knows, maybe this is just how he rolls. The one criticism I would have of the game visually is the bloom effects. They are too much at times, especially when you use the freeze power. There isn't a lot more to say about the presentation, it's overall really good. If you're a glass half empty kind of person, then all this will only serve as a stark reminder that these beautiful places don't really have many interesting stories to tell. Personally, I think the looks of Biomutant are in the end a triumph nonetheless. Okay, let's see what you actually do in the game. If there's anything you're going to like about this game, other than how gorgeous it is to look at, it's the immediacy of its character control, and the smoothness of its combat and traversal across the game world. This is a very important topic to me, as I have a bit of a pet peeve in terms of open world games and movement. If a game tries to immerse me too much and ends up including clunky character movement because it's realistic, I just sort of tune out. Like the Rockstar thing, where if you're controlling an out-of-shape man in his late 40s, you're going to feel like an out-of-shape man in his late 40s when you move around. I personally don't really enjoy that. I'm a gamer, I don't need to be made to feel like I'm out of shape, I can just go outside and jog for a little while and get the same results. Biomutant has none of that. Your character animations are smooth and responsive both in and out of combat. Stamina is unlimited and sprint speed is good. So good that I didn't feel the need to use any mounts. I was just okay with exploring around on all fours. Speaking of the mounts, they're really cool. I won't spoil them all here, but let's just say they go a bit beyond just having horse-like creatures to ride around. If there's one criticism I have of the mounts is that a couple of them are tied to the 4 main bosses of the game. Acquiring them is part of the quest that's in preparation to fighting these monsters and can only really be used in the biome that you encounter the boss in, which is a bit of a bummer since these are among the cooler mounts you can get in the game. Combat is one of the areas of the game that I've seen receive a lot of criticism by reviewers, calling it bad. These people are not correct. However, it is true that it has issues and quirks that make it hard to get used to. Biomutant's fights are most similar to something like Batman Arkham or Shadow of Mordor. Enemies outnumber you and surround you, and you're able to dodge or parry attacks while trying to keep a streak of combos that ultimately allow you to unleash your full power. Now, before the 1.4 patch that I mentioned before, I had a shit ton of issues written down. Some of them have already been patched, but there's still a few we can talk about. Just like the games I compared it to, Biomutant has no lock-on feature, unlike something like Dark Souls. The main difference is that Batman, for example, has a lot more magnetism and tracking to his attacks towards enemies than your Raccoon Man does in Biomutant. Take this combo for example. After firing 2 shots, I can throw my hammer and then jump to get it and swing it for a final blow. This attack has 0 tracking, meaning that if the camera is not centered in the enemy I want to hit, the attack will miss. This issue might be less prevalent using mouse and keyboard, but with a controller, the camera is moved with the right analog stick. Your right thumb is also the one you use to press the attack buttons. So doing both things at the same time is tricky. I stopped using warhammers altogether because of how useless this combo was compared to others. The lack of a lock-on feature can also be detrimental to keeping track of certain enemies that might be more dangerous than others. Early in my playthrough, I came across a Mega Mork. These bosses guard the chemical pools that you can use to change your character's appearance. 3 regular sized enemies spawn alongside it, and one of the Mega Mork's attacks one-shots me, so I have to be careful. If I focus my combos on the boss, I can stun lock it. Like in this clip, everything goes fine until I cast the freeze power. You see what happened there? I was ready to continue stun locking the boss, with the camera aim mostly at it, but my character decided to attack the lesser enemy instead, giving the boss the window to kill me. This is not the only time this happened to me, and while the patch I mentioned took some steps into fixing the issue, I can confirm it's still there. When you first start Biomutant, you will find yourself not landing attacks, getting swarmed, constantly running away to heal or shoot. It's definitely something that you have to get used to. But when you do get used to it, when you find a weapon with the moves that you're comfortable with, a powerful ranged weapon, and a set of powers that fit your style, oh man.
This is me. I think it's apparent I need to rethink my life a little bit.
About a quarter of the way into my first Biomutant playthrough, it all just sort of clicked, and I immediately realized what I had to do to become unstoppable. This game offers a very satisfying power trip. By the end of your journey, you will basically be a superhero in this world. The next point is something that I don't usually care much about, but some people do, so here it is. This is not the most balanced game in the world. I'm not usually one to cry about balance in a single player game. I just use the thing I have fun with and that's it. But it is true that some things don't make a lot of sense here. Remember the Mega Mork that I had so much trouble stun locking in Melee? What happens if I just shoot it? Range combat in this game is pretty much broken. Its most overpowered combination has been nerfed significantly and it's still the easy mode in this game, even in the hardest difficulty. Enemies just don't know how to deal with you as long as you circle around them while shooting. I personally like this, for reasons that I will get to in a minute. Spoilers is not a very good reason. But for now I will say that while it's much easier and simple, it's definitely the boring way to play. Trust me when I tell you you are restricting your enjoyment of this game if you only shoot things. You're missing out on all the flashy kung fu and melee. As a companion to the cool combat, there's a great crafting system that makes looting very rewarding. The way it works is that each weapon has a base type that you can loot, meaning the blade of a greatsword or the receiver of an assault rifle. Then you also collect parts. These have different qualities and with various attributes, and you can mix and play around with them until you create a weapon that suits your style. There are more balancing issues here. I mentioned that even after the patch, range damage is king in this game. However, even among melee weapons, there are some stark differences in efficiency during combat. At the moment, 200 swords are the key, not only because they tend to deal more damage, but because their moveset and combos have a lot of spin attacks and wide slashes, and in a game when you're constantly surrounded by enemies, these are way more helpful. Remember the hammer throw combo from before? Well, this is the greatsword equivalent. It's also very hard for enemies to interrupt it. There's just no comparison here. You might have also noted that a lot of my footage is using the same greatsword. I'm not sure if this is something I should mention as a downside or it's just that I was very lucky. But around the end of my first playthrough, when I had played like 15 hours or so, I found this weapon. It freezes enemies, giving me time to stun lock them, and it also heals me to full health whenever I kill anything. It took me almost 30 hours of play to find a weapon that even came close to it. It does more damage, but it doesn't heal me or freeze enemies. As a matter of fact, it sets them on fire and makes them run away, which is the opposite of what you want if you're damaging an enemy. Overall, I really like the loot system. Comparing it to other games with loot I played like Borderlands or The Division, I like that if I want I can improve my existing weapons with better parts I find, rather than get rid of the whole thing. It also has a lot of charm to it and ties into the setting of the game. Look at my sword. It's the blade of a ceiling fan and the head of a vacuum cleaner. It's great. It also makes it really funny when you find things that are not trash. I was exploring an area early in my playthrough and looted an ACOG scope. I don't know why, but I found this hilarious. I'm here putting glass bottles and shit for scopes on my weapons, but I can also find an actual thing that humans use as a weapon attachment. The kicker is that it's not nearly as good as some of the other things I can put on the weapon. It would be nice to have the option to instantly dismantle things as you find them, because if you play this game long enough, you end up knowing which things are worth taking and which are worth pulling apart. As far as the combat being unbalanced, thankfully this game is just not very hard, which some people might consider a negative, but I think that it helps to give players a chance to experiment. I didn't use this wonderful greatsword for 30 hours because it was my only option, it was just my best option. But you'll have no problem playing around and seeing what you like. Combat can be frustrating with the camera angles and enemies storming you, but once you get used to it, you can pretty much use every combination and still get through encounters. Now you might be wondering, why didn't I experiment this match and always use the same weapon? Well, that leads us neatly into another issue the game has, encounter design and repetition. Combat encounters in Biomutant, aside from boss fights which are pretty much self-explanatory, follow one of 4 possible combinations. A few humanoid enemies. I call them humanoid because I don't know what they are. I mean enemies that are physically like your character. A few of these and a big guy. 2 sets of a few of these and a big guy fighting each other. And then there's the animals, which can be one or several of them. Oh, and sometimes 2 different species of creatures will team up to fight you. The reason for this is unknown. These animals are the biggest issue here. Animals in the world of Biomutant are guilty of some of the most egregious cases of copy-paste that I think I've seen in an open world game. Every animal looks different, but its animations and attacks are almost always the same. This applies to the friendly herbivores as well. They are all horse-like quadrupeds. Some look very distinct to each other, but the minute you see them move around it becomes clear it's just a reskin. Off the top of my head, the only case when I saw it worse was Mass Effect Andromeda. Remember in Andromeda, when BioWare wanted us to believe that different planets with completely different ecosystems and weather cycles all had the same animals in them? Can you imagine the first pictures of the Mars rover reaching Earth, and it's like a zebra and a cow just hanging out? Anyway, I digress. This is not as much of an issue in humanoid enemies since they have quite a bit of diversity when it comes to their attacks and gear. But like I said, variety in gear does not completely remove the issue of encounters always feeling the same, regardless of when, where or why. This includes boss fights that are not part of the main quest. It's always a big 4-legged creature that spits energy bolts at you. This is why I always use the same sword, because it allowed me to destroy my foes in the most efficient way possible. Same reason why I like that ranged combat is overpowered. This was me when I felt like doing the whole Kung Fu super rat thing, and this was me when I just didn't feel like it.
Oh, yeah.
You can even recreate the scene from Raiders. You know, the one where the swordsman is doing all the faffing and Indy just shoots him. So yeah, despite me liking the option, it's not really a positive when I say I enjoy something because it gives me a way to skip parts of your game. One last little rant about enemy design in the game. Why would they think it was a good idea to have an enemy attack by jump spinning at you? Some developers saw this animation and thought, yeah, that looks like a readable, well-telegraphed animation for an attack, add it to the game. You can also encounter more than one of these at the same time, and like I mentioned before, you won't be safe from this shit even if you change environments. Cause enemies might look different, but they will Beyblade your ass just the same. This issue is also quite prevalent in exploration as well, to a point where the game seemingly understands it and just names places like Bunker 9E, Bunker 10C. I think the repetition in the areas would have been fine if, like I said, the game world had a bit more story to it. We go back to the beginning about the place not feeling all that well thought out. Yes, I'm starting to sound like a broken record on this one, but it also affects exploration and quest design, so hear me out. I was exploring the desert area to the north. This part is really cool because, unlike other parts of the map, the main story missions don't lead you up here, so it felt like I was doing some very organic exploring. I came across some skelly men, and I thought, oh shit, cool, I haven't seen these guys before. I take care of them and the mini-boss that shows up, explore their place a bit, and nothing. Just some loot. No indication as to why they're skeleton creatures, no environment clues so I can piece together who they were. Even the narrator had nothing to say about them. I have several examples of this. I was exploring and saw 2 guys fishing. I approached them to talk and they just attacked me. I murdered them and I was left thinking, what was that about? They didn't have any faction uniforms, just these weird masks. This last one would be so simple, just add a little text that says bandit or outlaw. Giving context to a player's actions helps understand their role in the world and the effect they have in it. I'm gonna do the lazy thing again and compare this with another developer. The internet likes to make fun of their games a lot, and it's true they have been dropping in quality and complexity over the years, but I think they still do this better than most. Yes, you know it, 16 times the detail. Bethesda games, both Fallout and Elder Scrolls, occupy a cool niche to me, as being some of the few open world games that truly take the concept to a different level when it comes to populating their game worlds with interesting stuff to see and do. A dungeon in, let's say, Skyrim will have a very similar look and layout as any other. The gameplay aspect would almost always be the same. Get in, kill enemies, loot stuff, face a challenging foe at the end and get a cool reward. It's the narrative context of each dungeon that adds nuance to the experience. It might just be draugrs and traps, or it might be bandits exploring the tomb and fighting these draugrs. You can encounter the witch coven, some apprentice necromancers. Whatever you find in there, it will not just be a change in the type of enemy you face. Most, if not all of the times, you will be able to piece together a small narrative of what's going on in there. Whether it is from the looks of the environment, or more direct means like enemy dialogue or reading notes you find. This might sound like a small thing, but it goes an incredibly long way into making your open world truly feel like a place where you are going on an adventure and discovering new things. And don't get me wrong, Biomutant has a lot of cool places and things to discover. And it's mostly what kept me going for 2 playthroughs, along with the crafting, looting and combat. But in the end, these are mostly visually interesting things and add no context to this beautiful world. Then there's the quests. Oh man, the quests. Let's talk about the main missions first. In the World Eater's questline, every single stage plays out the same. You're told to go see an NPC who has an idea on how to take out the monster. This idea is always a mount of some sort. You will then do a fetch quest or 2 for this NPC, who will then say something along the lines of, "The last thing we need is a distraction for the monster. My friend knows where to find some." You go talk to the friend, who also sends you on a fetch quest, and then you're finally ready to take on the boss. My biggest issue with this isn't the repeating structure as much as the repetition within the repetition. At no point you go talk to the second NPC of the questline, and when you get there are they like, "I'll tell you where the things are, but first help me rescue my family, they have been taken by bandits," or "Help me clear my farmstead of these vermin." Never. Not once. You just talk to them, they will comment on the world ending, on you being good or bad, and on what tribe you align for the war, and that's it. The boss battles themselves are at best kinda interesting and at worst frustratingly wonky. The other main quest is a tribe war. These missions are so mind-bogglingly repetitive that the developers seemingly knew this and added the option to completely skip more than half of it. I did it the long way around on my second playthrough, and let me tell you, it only got like 10% better, since the latter tribes use different equipment, but that's it. By the way, on my second playthrough I wanted to get the dark ending since I was good the first time round, but your alignment carries over to New Game Plus, so I had to be extra evil and do a ton of extra things, among them the full tribal war quest, in order to get enough dark points for the ending. Let me tell you right now, in case you're wondering, it wasn't worth it, and it only changes like a couple of things in the final cutscene. It all plays pretty much the same way. Last but not least are the side quests. Some of these are by far the most interesting quests in Biomutant, however they are buried under many non-interesting ones. The game has only 2 kinds of quests, main and side, and I think they should have had 3. Maybe main quest, side quest and tasks or something? Let me explain. I came across my favorite side quest just by exploring the world and seeing a town on fire. I get there and it's under attack. I take care of the arsonists, and then I have the option to help rebuild the town. While parts of this are also fetch quests, like bringing wood for the townhouses, the narrative context makes it more compelling because of course they're gonna need wood, and the best option is to have the badass who saved us go fetch it. Also, after every step you visually see the town improving, which is a nice touch. The kicker is that on my second playthrough I passed through the town and it was fine, not burning. Later on I was given the quest to burn it down myself because I was now evil and had sided with the fascist samurai rats. This is the quest that showed me that the developers know what it takes to make enjoyable and satisfying content to populate your game world. They maybe just ran out of time or something, because this is the only time I came across a quest like this one. There was another highlight, when I found a man asking me to help his friends. They had fallen unconscious from some fumes in the sewers, and I had to get down there and slap them awake, which actually brought some nice memories.
Wake up! Up and at him!
The main issue here is that these are classified as side quests, and things like finding all the TVs, or the toilets, or the phones, which are much less rewarding and feel more like a chore, are also side quests according to the game. I feel like they needed a third classification for these. since the player may very well come across a couple or more of these less interesting quests before they encounter a truly engaging one, and by then they might have assumed they were all the same. I know it almost happened to me, and it's a shame because some of the cooler things to discover in this world come from side quests, from gear to mounts and even some permanent visual changes in the game world. Also, let's not ignore the fact that the side quest I'm telling you was the highlight for Biomutant could very well be the starting quest in any other game. Helping or dooming a town is the most nuance I've found from the side quests in this game. There is no bloody barren questline or come fly with me here. One last point that I feel is worth mentioning is that, while some aspects of Biomutant's design feel like they are wasting your time, this is all very much not an intentional choice by the developers. Nowhere in Biomutant can you buy crafting materials for $1.99. There is no awesome side quest pack for $4.99. Nor are there any XP boosts or shit like that. So many developers nowadays have the goal to fill their single player adventures with shitty microtransactions, to the point where many aspects of the very design of the game are influenced by these greedy tactics. Yes, I'm talking about you. So, after all of this criticism, why am I going to recommend this game to you? Well, it's just very unique. Like I mentioned before, it feels like a product from a time where games were more honest, and there weren't as many decisions inspired by corporate greed or public opinion. Experiment 101 set out to make an open world adventure game with a unique vision in mind. And you can really feel like the mistakes they made along the way are honest and unintentional. You play this game and sometimes it's fun, sometimes engaging, other times it's uninteresting and tedious, but every time you can tell there was passion required to make all of these things. One of the more damning things I can say about Biomutant actually is that at the time of writing this, having played 40 something hours, I just don't feel like it anymore. There's still a ton of things to do according to my quest log, I just don't think they will show me anything that's worth the time investment. I read this now that I'm recording the voiceover and I can confirm I still don't feel like playing Biomutant. Future me that's editing the video, can you maybe add text indicating how you feel? For a lot of people this will be fine. Almost 50 hours is a good number of hours to play any game, and I certainly feel like it was worth it. Other people maybe expect to play the game for hundreds of hours, and some people might do so. If you do, then good for you. I say all this because I personally have a pretty high tolerance for repetition in games. As long as there's interesting things to see, loot, and kill, I can play for long without getting bored. Someone who's not like that might be disappointed at how quickly Biomutant's glamour wears off and you start feeling the repetition. I mentioned how all this was harder to write because many of the issues were patched less than a week after release. If the developers put half the passion they had while making the game into its post-launch content and patching it, I have no doubt that I will return to the world of Biomutant sometime soon. I would like to end the video by talking about a cool feeling I had while playing the game. During one of my sessions, I encountered the end of the world for the first time. Like many games of its kind, Biomutant has boundaries that take the shape of mountains or lakes of oil. This particular place had a large body of water and what seemed to be like another region in the distance. I stood there for a second, watching that probably unrendered and untextured land hidden by fog, and couldn't help but feel that I wanted to go there. I wanted to see what else there is in this world, what other secrets I can find. I honestly think I haven't felt that way about a game since I was a child. I want to play Biomutant 2 someday and see how much the team has improved the formula. I want to, I don't know, pre-order Biomutant Andromeda in 10 years and realize I've made a huge mistake. So yeah, if you like the sound of the positive aspects I mentioned in the video, from the awesome visuals to the cool combat or the secrets to be found, you should give this game a try. Maybe not full AAA price, but do keep it on your radar for any sales and discounts. Thank you so much for watching. Consider liking and subscribing for more of these, game reviews and other stuff. I have to go now. I'm fighting these creatures again. What? Are you fucking kidding me? I can't walk on the roots? 0 out of 10.